uh, recording. So good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the largest, fastest growing, and the most active large-scale Scrum community, having gone viral and global after it was initiated in New York City some years ago. Today we have a special guest, Jutta Eckstein, who is joining us from Germany. I met personally with Jutta a few months ago in Berlin at the LeSS conference, and I was really thrilled, very impressed by her topic, by how she presented it and how the audience reacted to her speak. So I would like to offer the same opportunity to everyone here now virtually, because not everyone was able to join us in Berlin. Just a few words about Jutta before I pass the baton over to her. She is a coach and consultant. She's the founder of the Agile Sustainability Initiative, and she has co-created a sustainability assessment model or a tool. She will be more explicit on that. They both focus on the environmental, social, and economic impact of Agile teams. Jutta has published her experience in various books, most recently in the book called Company-Wide Agility with Beyond Budgeting. And by the way, also, everything comes together at the end of the tunnel, Beyond Budgeting, by Bjarti Bogsnes, who actually spoke to us multiple times over the last 8+ years, who was also one of the keynote speakers in Berlin. So it all comes together. So Jutta is a great add-on, and a great asset to our community. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'll just pass the order over to you, and just take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sheen. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really super happy to be here. Yeah, so I wrote a bunch of books, and some people might know me from those books, from the work that I did in the Agile field before. However, now today I want to really talk about Agile and sustainability. And the reason is, why did I get to that topic? So there are actually various reasons. So one is this one. So I'm a passionate hiker, and this is a picture from the area I'm living, and I really want you to see this. It looks like that. And it's close by where I'm living. It's there are hilly area, which is still known as a hiking area. But what you see as well is that most of the trees are really damaged or dead. And that is true for actually 80% of the trees in Germany. It is reported that they are damaged. So in these ones, I believe they are not even damaged, they are really dead. So this concerns me, obviously. Another reason is that I'm maybe even more passionate in scuba diving. And as a scuba diver, I'm concerned about the various forecasts. Like there's this one forecast saying by 2050, there will be more plastic in the sea than fish. And by 2030, there will probably the coral reefs will be damaged, and not sure how passionate I will be by then. And so because of that, I had been thinking, well, of course I can do something in my private life, but I have a much better leverage if I do something in my professional life. And also I do believe we in the Agile field actually do have a responsibility to work on Agile sustainability. And this is what I want to talk about. So what is it? And also, what can we all do? And perhaps before what we can all do, or with that, where do we stand actually? And the way I want to talk about it is first I want to present some facts, then insights, and then what can we do? So let's get started. So there are various scientists out there measuring stuff, and there are various forecasts, and this is just one of the many. And This is a kind of a recent one where Anders Andrea, I'm not sure if I pronounce his last name right, has forecasted different cases about the energy consumption of ICT, information and communication technologies. And as you see, it's the forecasted 2020 to 2030, and these are just the various numbers. And of course, there's an extreme positive, and then a present, and then an extreme negative maybe, or expected actually. It's what it says here, that's more expected. And for the expected one, which is that one, this would actually mean by 2030, IT would consume more than 20% of the overall energy consumption. And just because of that number, and even if it's lower, which would be great, because of that number, it means there's something we need to do. All of us who are, especially in the field of IT. And so there's a need. And again, I would like to tell you what that means. So that means we want to talk about a thing that's called sustainability. And I want to give you a couple of definitions. So the first definition about sustainability is one which is pretty old, by a so-called Brundtland Commission from the United Nations. That was a report which was chaired or headed by Miss Brundtland. That's why that report then got that name. And basically it says, whatever we do, we always have to keep future generations in mind so they can live their lives as well, so that we are not living at the cost of future generations. And that's like one definition, which I pretty much like. However, it's very broad. There's another definition also by the United Nations, which is based on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And maybe some of you have seen these pretty pictures. They are often shown, especially right now, because the COP28 has just finished. I'm not sure if this was a big thing in the place you are living in. However, those 17 Sustainable Development Goals, they're aiming for various things, like you see no poverty is here, or zero hunger. Then one of my favorites, of course, life below water. But also you have something like the growth. So it's really in different areas. And some areas, if I look at them, they make sense to me in my professional life, but some don't at all. That's why for me, the Brundtland definition is really to coarse-grained. The Sustainable Development Goals is to fine-grained, and I try to go for a Goldilocks approach. And the Goldilocks approach is based on 3 pillars where actually those 17 goals also fall in, and 3 pillars based on the first one, the social part. And it says we are aiming for equity, health, and livability. And now I'm translating it right away to like our field, IT. That means diversity, safety, security, privacy, but also accessibility falls in that area. Then we have the environmental section. So there we often talk about, well, definitely protecting the planet, but also about green software and how we can reduce CO2 with the systems we are creating. And the third pillar is the economic one. So here we are talking about improving the lives and prospects of everyone everywhere. And this is the topic of sustainable economies and responsible products. And you might have seen sustainability really falls in the middle. So it's really something that covers all 3 pillars. It's not one of them, it's really all of them. Now, I'm coming already to an example in our field. So a social example where sustainability didn't really work out is this one, and maybe you have seen this in like other occasions. So I found this on way back when it was still called Twitter. And there was Shirley Wu who wanted to create an account by putting in her first name and last name, but then wasn't accepted because the system actually expected that her last name has at least 3 characters. So speaking of inclusion, maybe not so much so. And we more often do stuff like that without really thinking. And by the way, let me be really clear also with maybe other examples. I don't believe that the people who created that software thought intentionally, we don't want to have people like Shirley Wu here. They were more thinking, well, how are we called? What are our names? And then just take it from there. And so, but it also says already, maybe we already need more diversity in the teams working on the various systems. Now, moving on to the example about the environment. And here's some data from, again, the United Nations. They always come up with a report every 5 years about the electronic waste that had been created over the last year. So the last report was published in 2020, so it did look at the year of 2019. And as you can see there, it says here that in 2019, they figured that there's a plus of 21% just in the past 5 years. So we keep creating that electronic waste just like crazy. And yet, maybe now you think, okay, I am doing software, electronic waste, I don't know. It's not much to do with me except for maybe a phone that you're running or so, but let's just stick with the phone. When do you really buy a new phone? When do you decide that your phone really needs to go to electronic waste? Well, most often, oops, what's going on here? Most often you do so because the software is not running on the hardware anymore. So it is really the software that's not supporting old devices. And this is also a thing that we keep doing with the systems we are creating. So often we create systems and ask our clients to really have the latest device and run the systems on that. And maybe we should be more conscious about that. Now, the third example about economic, this is an example from Chef, and Chef, you probably know, is a cloud software or cloud system, and it's also at the same time a company supporting this open source cloud software. So there's a system called Chef and a company called Chef. That might be a bit confusing. Anyway, the company Chef had a long-standing contract with ICE, and people found out that ICE, so ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Sorry, should have said this right away. And people found out that ICE is using Chef, so this was in 2018, to manage the detention camps at the Mexican border, you know, where the kids were separated from their parents and all of that. You need software to do management stuff like that as well. And the developers were definitely not happy, and they investigated and said, like, well, we don't want that, and we should really get rid of that contract with ICE. And actually nothing happened. Chef said, well, it's a long-standing customer of us, and it has been always a good customer, giving good money to us, and so this is really helpful and good. And it went back and forth, not much happened until one of the developers just deleted the code he contributed to the system, and this way created enough pressure that this headline was created, so that really the contract was expired. So why is that here? Remember, economics said improving the lives and prospects of everyone everywhere. And definitely that system didn't do it. And again, the people who worked on it, they never thought of its use that way. So sometimes maybe we also need to look for a second time and understand how is our system used. So, and is this a responsible product that we are having here? Let's go on and look at, so what? So what are insights from that? And not sure how many of you have seen this model before. So that's Kinefin, and it's a way of understanding complexity. And I don't want to go into really very much details here, but just to give you a rough understanding, it's called Kinefin, by the way, give you a rough understanding. So there's an area called clear, which just means whenever I'm in a situation that's clear, then I know exactly what to do, and the way to solve whatever problem there is very easy. So my example often is maybe I see an empty bottle lying on the ground, and the solution is very easy. I pick it up and put it in the recycle bin, staying with sustainability here. So it's not a difficult solution. I just sense what's there, categorize, respond to it. Now, if we look at complicated, that's a different situation. It's more a situation where we need more knowledge how to solve that. And the example often given, now not in the sustainability sector, but if your watch, if you still have a watch, is broken, then probably you can't repair it yourself, but you have to go to an expert, and an expert knows what to do. Maybe the expert also makes a few experiments in order to well, or tries different paths in order to find out, is this really the problem, or is another thing the problem? But if you have the expert knowledge, you can fix it. Then complex says, well, the main thing about complex is that cause and effect are not directly connected. And the very typical example here is, and you probably have heard that in other places, the flap of the wing of a butterfly might end up as a tornado in somewhere in the States. Typically, I think in Florida is what the saying says. And now, of course, not every flap of the wing of a butterfly leads to that effect, right? If it would be, well, I guess we would have solved this in a different way, but it could. So there could be like various causes creating a specific effect. And then there is chaos, and chaos is more like that example. Oops, come on, I'm not sure what I'm doing today. It's more like this example. What's going on? Where, for example, your house is on fire, and of course, if the house is on fire, you're not starting to make a plan and say like, oh, let's figure out who is doing what, and then we get together and do it daily or whatever, and measure and so on. So the thing is, if the house is on fire, we all get out, and that's kind of the plan. We just do that. And the thing is, why I brought that here is that Greta Thunberg once said at the World Economic Forum, well, the planet is on fire. I want you to panic. So clearly what she said was, we are in this state here, and we have to act right away. And as it's true, we have to act. The problem often is that with acting in chaos, it means, well, we are not thinking really clearly, and we just do stuff. And maybe that's not a good idea. Now, what you see here already, what's happening, for example, in the EU, but also I know in the US is also stuff happening in various places. So legislation is more acting like we would be in a complicated space, meaning there are these long-term plans. We want to have net zero by 2050, and we want to have this and that by then. And however, the problem is, if we then reach 2050, but we are not successful, then what? So perhaps having this long-term plan is not the best idea, actually. So what we really should do is we should think and understand we are in complex space here, meaning we need to run like one experiment after the other and learn from that, getting feedback, and just do it this way. And you know who can do this better than us? I don't know. This is a typical agile way of working. So this is us. And now speaking of us, well, agile sustainability really means those two things. We are using sustainability by Agile or in Agile. So by Agile would mean we use all that we have learned. So the practices mindset, like navigating complex space, and help solve the climate crisis this way. And there are various groups actually doing this and asking for that. For example, there's Africa Agility, which is a group more in the social sustainability sector, who are actually always looking for mentors if you want to help. So what the mentors are doing, they are helping or coaching young Africans to learn about agile development, which helps them to make a living. And so this is what we are doing. And another example is Hack Your Future, which is a nonprofit organization. Well, Africa Agility is also nonprofit, which is working with refugees and helping them to improve and show their software development skills so they can get a job. And they are also always looking for Scrum Masters or whatever, product owners and so on. So people who can help them understand Agile development. Now, sustainability in Agile means that we use sustainability as a guidance to what we are doing. And that guidance can mean, for example, that we have a definition of done that and acceptance criteria in our stories that always monitors sustainability. So is the carbon footprint increasing? Do we consume more energy after we have now deployed the latest stories? So this is a way of really building sustainability in what we are all doing. Okay, so this was like the facts, the insights, and now the question is, what can we do? I want to start with something which is more from perhaps the user's perspective. And you remember the example that I had with signing up for an account and you could, and Shirley Wu could not. So what you can think of is a persona spectrum. And with the persona spectrum, you can make your system really accessible to everyone. So the Shirley Wus and whoever else. And the persona spectrum, there's a wonderful card that has been created by David Dame from Microsoft. I find this super helpful, which makes really clear that if we talk about accessibility, most often we are talking about the permanent handicaps, disabilities people have. However, there are also temporary ones and situational ones. For example, let's look at the hearing thing. So you might be hearing impaired or deaf, and so you have a problem using this voice control. But you might also have right now an ear infection, and this way, that's the reason why you have problems hearing. Or you are in a noisy environment, like the bartender or in whatever environment, and therefore you can't really navigate with the voice control. So that's in a specific situation. So the thing is, actually, we all have our abilities and disabilities at various times. And the problem often is that in a team, we think so much about ourselves because we just assume everyone else is like us. And of course, it would be great if we would have always teams that are super diverse, and therefore we would capture and cover just all possibilities there. And please try to have as much diversity in your team as possible. But I also know that there are limits. However, what you can do is, on the one hand, work with this persona spectrum, and on the other hand, which is a recommendation that I typically make these days, is if you're working with personas, like who is your target audience for the system you are creating, every once in a while, think about what if the complete opposite persona of your target audience would use the system. Would you exclude them, or would you include these people as well? So that's the one way of working with that. Then I want to move on and share another example. What you can do is, if you are using stories, and I'm not suggesting you're necessarily using exactly the Connextra format. You can use whatever format. I'm just using this because most of the people have seen this at least once in their actual life. So as a user, I want to, and you say the goal so I can, and the reason. Wonderful. Whatever you do and describe your stories, it's fine. However, what I suggest to you is, from now on, think as well about what impact your story has. So does it have an impact on the environment, on the social aspect, whatever? So just keep a short discussion, or at least a reflection on it, if that story has a specific impact on sustainability. And here's an example. So for example, as a designer, I want to reduce the amount of font types so the page performance will increase for users, and pages will be more digestible, with the impact of reduced CO2 emissions because of less data transfer. And I really want to repeat myself. It's really not about the form. It's about the content. So I really don't want to motivate necessarily the Connextra form, but the thinking about the sustainability impact. And if you think, well, this is fonts and not sure if this makes much of a difference, I want to make a little excursion about fonts here. And this was a professor from Poland, Lukasiak, probably wrong pronounced, I tried. And but he found, so he built a little web page where he measured the carbon emissions for that web page using different kinds of fonts. And what you can see clearly here is that system fonts are way better off than self-hosted fonts or Google fonts. So you can think about that. And if you still think perhaps this is not a big deal, well, there are quite some websites out in the world. And if all would think about what kinds of fonts they are using, maybe we would be better off. So that's that thing. Now, remember the electronic waste, that often it is software that creates the electronic waste, the e-waste, because we are just asking our clients to work with the latest devices, with the latest hardware. So the suggestion for that is using responsive design, so that you recognize what actually is supported on the actual client. And you do this by using sustainability toggles. So what do I mean with that? And maybe if you are more in development, you might know this kind of thing. So feature toggles is a way where you can activate, deactivate features. For example, well, and before I go deeper in this, you always look for those toggles, how long do you need them and how dynamic do they have to be? Like if we think of release toggles, that's a typical thing where a feature, a story is not really done. So we all know it's not working, but we still are deploying because other stories are done. Then we have a toggle that deactivates that story, and then probably it's not very dynamic because it changes just with the deployment, and probably it won't take long till that story is done. Maybe it's already the next day in our next deployment, it's done, and so we will activate it. On the other hand, then perhaps a different example are the experiment toggles. These are typical A/B tests, which are way more dynamic because we want to know how different users are acting. And now what I really want to talk about is very similar to the permission toggles over here, which you probably also know about or have heard about. So they are based on the login of the user. So I log in to a system, and based on my credential, some features are activated, others are deactivated. And sustainability toggles are exactly like that. So not necessarily based on the credentials, but based on the actual device that I'm using. So if I'm using an older device, then some of the newer latest functionality is deactivated. And if it's a newer device, then it will be activated. And I want to share a last thing here, which is what we also can do. We can think about energy aware operations. So one thing is that we can start understanding when and where is low carbon electricity available, and when is the energy mix renewable. Like in the country I'm living in, during the day, the energy mix is almost all renewable. During night, it isn't. And so what we can do, we can think of executing operations asynchronously at environmentally friendly times. So it could be non-critical jobs, tests, and all of that. So these are just a few examples of things that you can do, that you can consider of maybe, yeah, doing from now on. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to ask you to use that QR code and take that assessment. And so answering those various statements, and then we look at where are you with the team, with the clients you're working with, or with your company you're in, with the team you're in. And I would like us to take a look at where do we stand. So again, my suggestion is you are here scanning the QR code, but for being sure, I'm also putting in the bit.ly link in here, so you can use that as well. And while you do that, I try to find out if people are done and have answered already some statements at least. Let me see. And I know if you're looking at this, perhaps there are some things where you could say, oh, I have really no idea, which is cool because that's just how it is. Sometimes we don't know, and it just helps us getting started on understanding better what's going on here. And that's the whole thing. So that's the important thing, actually. Oh, I see the first data points are coming in. So this is good. Let us see what I would like to wait till we have a few data points so it makes sense to analyze what's there. So far it's not enough, and you might still think about. Okay, another one has finished that. And the interesting thing here is really, I think, starting to reflect on what are we really doing? What information are we missing? And what is it that we can really do here? What's the, yeah, what are the points that we can, or the steps that we can take? Okay, we have only 4, now more are coming in. This is good. Let's see. Needing a little bit more. And
Hey, folks, this is going to be erased. The data is confidential submission, so help you to generate some data if you don't mind. Just submit your responses. They don't go
well,
anywhere.
and it's anonymously anyway, so
Yeah.
nobody logs in
Yeah.
or anything. So nobody, the only thing that I can see is how many data points are there. So we have 7 people having replied right now, and I will probably now already go over because I also understand it takes a bit for you, and I do another refresh. Maybe there's another data point coming in. Let's see. Nope, there isn't. But anyway, let's take a maybe overall look at that. So what we can see is that the social area is, it seems, the one which is called the highest. So 5 is if you would have answered true. So it's 4.24. Versus the environmental is the smallest, and probably the reason is that you have never really thought about this, and that's why it's a 281, I believe, yes. And then economic is kind of doing well, almost 4, and the holistic is 338. Okay, let's dive into perhaps first the social. Well, we can also leave it like that. And if I go in here, and what we see is that very highly scored is about the preventing bad actors and the ensuring that we are a good team and preventing discrimination and disrespecting and so on. So this is not really coming as a surprise to me, because these are both topics that we have been talking about for quite some time. Now here, this one says the product service is designed to be accessible, which is, well, not so much so, because we are just, I would say, perhaps 2 years ago, we have started talking more about this. So that's why this is still better than some of the environmental stuff, but still, there's work to do. Now, looking at the environmental stuff, what we see here, what's kind of high is the energy being used in the office is renewable. So we see this more and more happening for some companies. So they are looking at where's the energy coming from. I can also imagine that some people have answered, I don't know. Then we have with the 3, the team monitors the hardware utilization of the product, both in use and while idle. This is already quite good with the 3. And then we have the team understands the environmental impact of the product. That's only a 2. So it's not what we are doing. And yes, because so far it has not been a topic. I also want to show maybe one other thing here, which is what's called a heat map. We have seen for this, the team monitors the hardware utilization, that it was quite high, and the average value, now I forgot what was the average value. The average value was 3. And if you look at the heat map, you see that nobody really said it's a 3. It's completely, some said, well, yes, it's true, and others know or they don't know, and so on. So the heat map, if you are using this with your team, you will also find out where's information missing and where do we need to talk about this, where do we diverge so much from each other. So that's the point about this. And now, just because I'm curious, I also did create a comparison between the LeSS conference in Berlin and here, and let us see, where are we here now? How do we compare? Okay, it's not so different. So, but you see, like in the colored fields, these are your answers versus the green, whatever, trapeze, or how this is called, rectangular shape. These are the answers of Berlin. So this is really, so your data is 3.8 and the comparative set was 3.75. This is really interesting. Here in the environmental, you said 2.7 cent on average, and in Berlin they said 2.73. So maybe there is the LeSS community sharing also here quite some things. So there are quite some things in common. That's pretty interesting. Okay, so I want to go back here. So this was where we started. By the way, what you have seen of that assessment is only an excerpt. So you saw, I think, like 12 statements, and in total these are 44, and it has been published under Creative Commons, so you're free to use it. We will share, of course, the link how you can use it, and maybe this way you can change your conversations in your teams for increasing sustainability. So just by having a different dialogue, asking different questions, we all can actually make a difference. And with that, I want to close and thank you so much. Maybe a little bit about that messy slide here. So on the one hand, we have now an Agile sustainability manifesto that you can support and sign. Then this is how you can reach me. Then the thing with the arrow here is the link to the assessment. Again, you can use that under Creative Commons. It's published, so you can you're free to use it also with your teams. And then there is like my homepage with the sustainability thing and the initiative Jean had mentioned before. Okay, so I'm happy to take any questions. And maybe I'm stopping my screen share, if that makes sense. And
Folks, this is the time. Feel free to ask Jutta.
yes.
I have a question for you, Jutta.
Yes, please.
So it's really great to finally meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
The slide that went by that talked about putting the sustainability goals in the definition of done resonates with me, but I only want things that are quantifiable and measurable in my definition of done.
Yes.
And I couldn't come up with any examples of a sustainable item that's measurable. Can you help me with some examples of things you've seen people do?
Yeah, so they really monitor the energy consumption of their system. And the simplest, not easiest, but simplest thing you can do is really looking at your CPU, what the system is doing. However, there are also more and more tools right now out there that you can use for the really also different platforms and so on that you can use to regularly monitor really the energy consumption. So that's the main thing. Then, of course, you could also think about accessibility, things which is more than in the testing area, that you have tests for that ensure that it can be used. Yeah. Does this help?
Yes, it does. I guess I'm an accidental sustainability guy, because the minute you can reduce the CPU cost or the load time, you hit me in the pocketbook. And so I care about that immediate impact, but I, for the life of me, could not calculate CO2 consumption because my fonts were wrong. That just didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Actually, I believe those tools, I think green coding is, for example, one company offering stuff, but there are various, and the best probably is looking at the Green Software Foundations, because they are also offering a lot of open source tools that you can use for various things. But I believe they are doing the math for you, and from the energy consumption, you can calculate the carbon footprint of the system.
Great, thank you.
What else? Should I look at the chat? There
Yeah, folks, if you have
was-
anything you would like to share at this point,
there was Tim was the first one.
it's best if you just say it out loud as opposed to typing it. Unmute and speak up.
I see that from Sam. If somebody wants to speak up, then I probably shouldn't take it, but I just read in the chat the comment from Sam. Is somebody
Sure.
speaking up? No. So because this is a very interesting topic to me, at least. So it says if you're working on mobile applications, battery consumption is definitely something. So sometimes you see in the release note saying low power consumption. And this is good. And I also try to do some stuff like I'm now using dark mode or something. However, we have to be really honest here. For tools like a phone, 80% of the energy consumption goes into the production. And that's why it's way more important that we are using these tools as long as possible. So it's not so important, for example, if we power them up with solar power or whatever, that is really only does make a minor difference. The big difference we can make is by keep using the phone for as long as possible. And still, it's definitely a good point. Then Karen, should I take that one? How to address cell phone providers needing step up to sustainability blade. They constantly encourage customers to upgrade to the newest model instead of offering software updates. They promote recycling, but this is less than what can be done. Apple has just come out with a new blah, blah, blah. You're right. I'm not saying blah, blah, blah because it's not important, but because it's the blah, blah, blah that I see that the phone companies are doing, right? Karen, do you want to add to that?
It just seems that, they have a very short memory, like supply chain. Even we just came out of COVID, and titanium comes from China, Japan, Kazakhstan, Russia.
Absolutely.
It's like, they just don't have very long memories for supply chain. And then, how do you get these big organizations? I know Microsoft has a climate change initiative. How do they do that? And, have all the products. And, I was just looking up, Adobe products for, more visuals and fonts. And then that seems to be like the other end of the spectrum to what you're saying. So, how do you talk about that? All these highly visual, products to draw people in and gain their attention. It would seem, again, that's the antithesis of, saving the world from fonts.
Yeah, that's true. So the fonts is, well, it's just one example. However, I really like your comment, and I have to make a product placement here. I'm really sorry. So my phone, I showed it already this way. And now I'm showing it this way. Oh, and I never know where to go with my hand.
Yeah.
So this is a Fairphone. And it starts already that the case, not sure if you have seen the sprinkles, is from
Yeah,
recycled
you could see
plastic.
the sprinkles.
Yeah, so it's recycled plastic, but more important is also what's inside. So some of the stuff is recycled, most of it is still not. They are trying, but what they do is, on the one hand, they look at how is the stuff mined and ensure that they are not buying stuff from mines where kids are working, for example. Another thing is that they provide pretty long support for the phone. So my last one I had for almost 7 years. So I was 1 month short of the 7 years. I really thought we will make it, but we had to separate, my phone and I. The interesting thing was there that I believe 2 years earlier already, the Fairphone company said, well, now it's really too tough to keep supporting the OS. It's typically the OS and then the apps, right? And the OS, so it comes with an Android in this case, but you can also, it's fair, you can also put Ubuntu on it if you like, or whatever else you come up with. And so I had run it on Android, and then 2 years earlier, Fairphone said, well, we can't really afford anymore to kind of support the Android system, because what we get from Google is just so far away, and also the chips that are in there, they are not really supporting it anymore. What then happened was that the Fairphone community stood up and said, well, we keep supporting it. And so it gave me another 2 years, because it is then open source, right? It is also fair in terms of use towards the client. Now, I know this doesn't answer really your question about the cell phone providers. It maybe answers it, well, this is what I do as a customer. And my big hope is that by companies like Fairphone, that they are showing what's possible, that over time, the big ones are also trying more stuff like that.
Well,
And
on that note, what if the big cell phone providers could have two categories of phones? People who want to update every other month and people
yeah,
who want to stay. So that might be, a sustainable mindset and approach. Like, I keep it until it dies and is
yeah,
gasping. So,
yeah,
a line for them and a line for the people who want to update all it.
right. So I don't know. I keep being an optimist. I don't want to look at the world in a different way. So I just think that, well, people like us can make a difference if we keep asking for stuff like that, or if we support companies who try a different path. And it's not that I say, well, and if you don't, then you're bad or whatever. You might do something else and try something else that speaks to you, and that's good. And maybe you just tell others what's possible. So this is all good. So yeah, I just recently learned that Nokia, I didn't know that they're still doing any kind of phone, but I learned that it seems they do, that they started using more recycling material now. Maybe if, again, I didn't even know that they still exist with that kind of product, but maybe that's a start. Perhaps it is like one after the other. Let's see. And yes, I also see Sam, like there are
Just a quick time
anti-patterns.
check, folks. We have about
That's true.
2 minutes remaining, and Jutta needs to jump. And so, Jutta, if you want to take another question from someone who's already in the queue submitted, that's fine.
There is no other in the
Okay.
chat, but there's only a comment, like there's an anti-pattern from Microsoft, and well, there are probably many anti-patterns around there in the world. Well, Karen, yours was an anti-pattern
Yeah.
as well, if you will. Yeah, how the cell phone companies are acting. So yeah, and so it means we are still in the position that we need to create the awareness, and we need to, I think we also need to ask. And perhaps this as the very last thing, what we can do now is, if we are picking our cloud, we can look at how sustainable is it. So meanwhile, the various cloud providers, they let us do that. Like Google, it even says it's, well, I can go for the price and latency and stuff like that, but I can also say how important is to me sustainability. And others do stuff like that as well. Not everyone that easy, where you just take a slider where you say, okay, this is important to me, but still they offer possibilities for us to also make a difference in the way we decide what kind of systems are we using, what kind of infrastructure frameworks, and so on. So that's what we can do. And we are on our gene.
Thank you very much, Jutta. On this last comment of yours, I would like to express my personal thanks to you. Thank you very much for coming out and doing this for us. It's been a great talk.
Thank you.
It has been
Yeah.
hopefully successful recorded also. Folks, I will be making this available later on for you and your colleagues that could not make it. And Utah's materials, and as well as some additional assets for learning, will be shared with me, and I'll pass them on to you. So on this special note, I would like to thank everyone for joining. Once again, a personal shout out to you, Jutta. Thank you for coming out and doing this for us at this late for you hour. And those that are in the Eastern Pacific or Central Time Zone of the United States, have a great the rest of the day, and have a good weekend. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.